Did they actually use the word brought down, and who was it that was telling you this?
The fire department, and they did use the word, we're going to have to bring it down. And we backed off a little bit to Pace University. There was another panic around 4 o'clock because they were bringing the building down, and people seemed to know this ahead of time, so people were panicking again and running. I went like that because they told us Building 7 was coming down. I do believe that they brought Building 7 down.
Not because of Amy Goodman at Democracy Now!, who refused to cover my story. She apparently told my companion, J.B. Fields, that maybe it was for the best. Maybe it's for... He broke down in tears. He was a big old warrior, not a warrior. He was a Navy guy. He was a military guy. And he broke down in tears on the telephone, the prison phone system, when he told me that Amy Goodman refused to cover my story because she thought that, she told him that, quote, maybe it's for the best. I mean, I would never listen to Amy Goodman again. I would never trust her again. Democracy Now? Change the name. Fascism Now. That's a better name for her. Fascism Now. Amy Goodman, if you hear this, I'm ashamed for you.
We are changing. Just one quick question for you. I know you were present for this event. Can you comment on World Trade Center 7 coming down? We know you were there for
Sorry,
that.
I can't talk right now because we're just working.
Just your comment. How do you think it came down?
We're just about to do an interview, so we have to just
if you could just give me a yes or no. Do you believe that it came down?
Right now. Thank you.
Okay, can't answer one question?
No, we're busy working.
Oh, really busy. Okay. I understand how it works.
Building 7 ablaze at the moment and apparently getting ready to collapse. My hearts go out to all the people.
Reason why, can you just ask me, is there a reason why a lot of progressive radios, I mean, KPA, a lot of them are doing a lot more on it now, as yourself? Do you know why that is? Why it was such a hot potato? I mean, you obviously made some decisions. Why was it such a hot potato?
This is not a good time to...
The point of Democracy Now! Is to provide a broad forum for different ideas. You know, I see the media as a huge kitchen table that stretches across the globe, that we all sit around and debate and discuss the most important issues of the day: war and peace, life and death. And anything less than that is a disservice to the servicemen and women of this country. They can't have these debates on military bases. They rely on us in civilian society to have the discussions that lead to the decisions about whether they live or die, whether they're sent to kill or be killed. Anything less than that is a disservice to a democratic society. So,
Hi, my name is Mark Phillips, and I'm an engineer, mechanical engineer degree in that, and I'm also a member of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. However, they're not part of this operation. This is all me. I'm here at the Cal Poly campus on San Luis Obispo, California, because Amy Goodman is going to be speaking here in the lecture hall behind me in just a few minutes. And I need to ask Amy an important question about 9/11. But I need to give you some background information here first. In May 2003, I first became aware of Amy Goodman and her program Democracy Now! And was just blown away by how great it was. And I decided right then and there that our public radio station needed to carry this program every day. Well, to make a very long story very short, 21 months later, after they initially said no, they finally said yes. And the show has been running ever since. It's one of the most popular shows on the radio, and it gets a lot of support from donations every year. In November of 2006, Amy came to San Luis Obispo to speak for the first time. At that point, she was at the Vets Hall. And I was fortunate enough to be able to introduce her because of my connection with getting her on the radio. Actually got a standing ovation for my efforts from 400 of my closest friends. It was a pretty big day for me, and The point being that no one was a bigger supporter of Amy Goodman than I. And I loved her show, and I loved what she was doing, and I thought what she was doing was very important. Since that time, I've had dinner with Amy twice. Once in July of 2007, where we chatted fairly amicably about this and that. And again in July of 2009, when I went with the specific purpose of presenting to her evidence of the controlled demolition of the Twin Towers in Building 7. This is the evidence that has been collected, among others, by architects and engineers for unTruth. And I had several things to show her. I pointed out to her that the molten metal that was discovered in the debris, and many witnesses talked about, is not possible from a hydrocarbon fire of jet fuel or any other office materials. It simply, fires don't get hot enough to melt steel, and it's never happened before. I talked to her about the NIST report, the final report on World Trade Center Building 7, and in that report, where they finally acknowledged, as a result of efforts by architects and engineers for unTruth, finally acknowledged that Building 7 actually came down at free fall for over 100 feet. That's a pretty remarkable thing for a building with an area greater than an acre per floor. It fell at free fall, not virtual free fall, not close to free fall, but actual free fall for 12 stories, 8 stories, about 100 feet over 2 seconds. And I explained that that's just not possible through any means other than controlled demolition. And during this conversation with Amy at the dinner, it was clear that Amy didn't want to talk about this. She was very nervous, very upset, didn't have a single question that she asked me, didn't have any of the probing kind of questions that she usually asks when she's interviewing somebody. None of that was present. It was very embarrassing and uncomfortable for everybody at the table. So I decided to leave the dinner early. I figured it just wasn't much point in sticking around. But before I left, I mentioned this one last paper to her. I said, here's a paper written by an international team of scientists, published in a peer-reviewed journal. The title of this paper is Active Thermitic Material Discovered in Dust from the 9/11 World Trade Center Catastrophe. I explained that this international team of scientists studied 4 samples of World Trade Center dust. And in every single sample, they found a mixture of aluminum and iron oxide. This is thermite. Except that this material was so highly engineered, the particles were so small, that they called it nanothermite. This is very, very highly engineered stuff. It's highly exothermic, and it explains all of the phenomenon that we've seen that are not capable of being explained by an ordinary hydrocarbon fire. The rapid collapse of the buildings, the presence of molten metal, those sorts of things. I told her about this paper. I put it down on the table in front of her, and I begged her to interview one of the authors of this paper so that we could get this truth on the air where it needs to be. And so I'm going to ask her today why she didn't do that, because she hasn't. She hasn't interviewed any of the authors of this paper. So my purpose here today is simply to ask her why. I don't really expect a clear answer, and that's going to be my point, I think. I think people need to know that for whatever reason, Amy cannot bring us the truth on this matter, and she may have a very good reason for doing so. I did ask her at the dinner with her whether or not she felt physically threatened, and she said no, but she might have to say no even if she felt she was. So I'm not here to make judgment on Amy in any way. She may have a very good reason for not getting into this subject matter, and actually I hope she does, because I really respect her a lot. But I think people need to understand that for whatever reason, she can't go there, and we can't rely on her to tell us the truth about this and perhaps other matters as well. That'll be up for the viewer to decide. So we'll see what Amy has to say in a bit here.
Okay on the end. Thank you so much for everything.
Amy, yes. Hi. You might remember me. Last time you were here, I introduced you at the Vets Hall. 400 people. I was involved in getting you on the station. I spent 21 months doing that.
No, we had dinner together.
Yes, we had dinner together twice. And the last time I had dinner with you, I wanted to talk to you about 9/11. And I showed you quite a few documents about 9/11. I showed you
on
I showed you the final report by NIST that shows the free fall of Building 7. I showed you pictures of buildings that were in far hotter fires that didn't collapse. I showed you a lot of information about the truth of what happened on 9/11, and I was pretty impressed by how unimpressed you were. You didn't seem to want to talk about it.
I'm sure you've done this a million times.
Usually it's the title page.
Is this the title page?
Yeah, that's it.
Oh, thank you.
Well, thanks very much.
This is for Joanna.
So the last thing I did, Amy, was I gave you this paper. This paper called Active Thermitic Material Discovered in Dust from 9/11 World Trade Center Catastrophe. Written by an international team of scientists, published in a peer-reviewed journal. I begged you to interview one of the authors of this 3 years ago. Can you tell us why you didn't choose to interview any of these authors?
I'm happy to take this.
You took it 3 years ago.
Book on the subject of democracy.
Do you want to talk about this after?
I'm sorry I didn't bring it along.
I'll take anything.
You took it 3 years ago and you didn't do anything then. I don't see why we should believe you do anything about it now.
Thank you so much.
My name's Joanna.
Okay, so you saw Amy's response to my question. I think it's interesting. During her talk, Dennis Moynihan introduced her and was describing a lot of the things she's done and described Amy as fearless, and certainly her experience in East Timor would lead one to believe that. Michael Moore talks about Amy in the foreword to her book about how she will be there wherever the action is, wherever the story needs to be told, she'll be there. And Amy herself describes DN as Democracy Now! As a platform to provide differing views on subjects, and anything less than a full discussion of the issues regarding war and peace is a disservice. I would agree with that. She also talks about breaking the sound barrier, and I would also agree with that. And I just wish that in the issue of 9/11 and the truth of what happened on 9/11, the most important issue of our era, and responsible for the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq and freedoms being restricted at home, all of it traces back to this one event on 9/11, and it appears that the story that we're being told is a complete fabrication, and we have the evidence to prove it. In fact, we have the evidence to prove the official story is not possible because it violates the laws of physics. And the only plausible explanation for how those buildings came down is controlled demolition. And as you saw, Amy Goodman is not going to talk about it, so I don't expect to see it on her show anytime soon.